Good evening. Welcome to the very first live stream of 2026. Thank you so much for joining tonight. And if you're watching on replay, thanks for checking us out later on. To introduce myself, my name is Richard Hebert with Engel & Volkers New Orleans, a real estate advisor here in New Orleans. I've been doing this for about 7 years now. I've seen a lot of different things in the market, many changes over those 7 years. And tonight, I'm so excited to have another special guest join us. And as you can tell from the title, today we're talking about the big, hairy, scary of it all, insurance. I am so excited to have you here. As we know, everyone loves New Orleans. They love New Orleans homes. They love the style, the architecture, the history, the vibes, but they probably don't love the cost of homeowners insurance. I don't know that anybody does, but if you do, that's your own special talent and gift. So tonight we're going to slow it down a little bit, talk about the elephant in the room that is homeowners insurance, answer any questions that you have. As a reminder, this is completely live unless you're watching the replay. But if you're watching it live, remember whether you're on Facebook or Facebook or YouTube, you can always leave a comment in the chat box. I'll see that live. We'll make sure that all questions get answered. We'll be live for about 1 hour, so feel free to drop those in there. And a couple things, I'm always trying to promote something, but I would love to share that for the new year, we have rolled out our brand new 1 hour private homebuyer bootcamp class. This can be online or in person. Online, we can do a Google Meet or a Zoom or what have you, or you can join us at our brand new Engel & Volkers New Orleans shop located on Historic Magazine Street. It's right at the corner of Washington and Magazine. It is a wonderful opportunity. It is completely free. It is a one-on-one opportunity for you to take a 1 hour class to learn everything you need to know, just about within reason, everything you need to know about home buying. So that's going to take you through the entire process, getting ready to search, the actual search itself, the contract process, inspections, insurance, and then we'll even cover some fun stuff about continued home ownership. So budgeting, maintenance, that kind of stuff as well. So if you would like to book one of those home buyer bootcamp classes, they are 1 hour. We'll schedule those together. Feel free to scan the QR code that you see on your screen now. Visit richardhebertrealtor.com. Or you can always text or email me directly. My phone number is 504-617-5184. That is my personal cell phone number, so feel free to call or text me anytime. And my email address is richard.hebert, Hebert, at evrealestate.com to book your private home buyer bootcamp. That's available anytime in perpetuity. We're super excited to have it. And I do have to say, of the 4 people who have attended the home buyer bootcamp, 3 of those folks are now under contract. So it'll make sure that you feel like you're in a good place to buy and that you know what you're getting into and you'll be feel comfortable doing so. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to Real Estate New Orleans. We post fun home tours. We do a lot of educational content. There's so much coming out in 2026. I am so excited about that, including our regular bi-weekly live streams such as this one. So pending the Mardi Gras schedule, we'll figure out what's going on there, but you'll probably not see me live streaming from Muses at the parade route, but still, we'll stay relatively bi-weekly on that. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Richard Hebert Realtor and on TikTok at Real Estate New Orleans. So without further ado, I am so excited for our special guest. Our special guest for the evening is Lee Miller, agency owner and broker of Goosehead Insurance. Lee is a very dear friend of mine, an incredible Mardi Gras buddy. You will, in fact, see Lee on the parade route at some point, I am sure. And Lee's also, of course, a phenomenal resource for all things insurance. Lee has played an integral part in helping so many of my clients navigate their insurance questions, their insurance policies, all of that, and helping make their home ownership dreams come true. So please join me in welcoming the legend and the icon himself, Lee Miller of Goosehead Insurance. Hi, Lee.
Thank you. Hello. And I think we should take a vote to see who thinks it's a good idea for you to do the podcast on the Muses route, because I would like to see that personally.
If we can figure out the technology and find a Wi-Fi hotspot that works during Mardi Gras, maybe we'll do it. Maybe our viewers will get the opportunity to see me clobbered with a shoe from the neutral ground, which, that leads me to remind folks, I'd love to hear, are you sidewalk side or neutral ground kind of people? Let us know in the chat. Lee, what are you?
Great divide. I would say I'm definitely a neutral ground side. I will get on the sidewalk when I have to, but I would much rather be in the neutral ground.
Yes, a little room to breathe. I like the neutral ground because I can back out of there as I need to. Lee, we're going to dive into a series of questions, some of which, thank you so much if you pre-submitted your questions. That was a really cool thing that I saw this round, is that we got some emails from people when they saw the post. So if you send in a question, it'll probably get answered tonight. And if not, please feel free to remind us in the comments. And with that, if you would like to, I'm changing the QR code now. So if you would like to, you can always get started by scanning the QR code on the screen. Even if you're a current homeowner, Lee can help you shop new policies, see if you can beat the current rate that you have. Lee, you also do like auto insurance and stuff, right?
That's right. Home, auto, and flood insurance are our specialty. We also have a referral program for commercial policies as well, so we can also assist there.
Nice. And you're not just in Louisiana. What all states do you service?
That's right. Yeah, we're Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama.
Okay, so most of the Southeast. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. So to dive on into this, we're going to start talking about how we can think about, New Orleans has a lot of older homes, right? That they can present some fairly unique challenges compared to markets that may be a lot of newer construction. So one thing that comes up constantly in New Orleans is historic housing. We have homes that are 100 plus years old, and buyers all the time are asking how insurance works in that context. So let's start there. Can you explain a little bit about replacement cost versus actual cash value? I know some people, when they get their policy back, they may be buying a house for $250,000, but the policy, the replacement value is written at $350,000. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that is a super common thing that happens, and it's a little bit of a rub for people because they're not expecting it. I think the knee-jerk reaction is to feel like an agent is fluffing up the policy just to make more money on the policy, but that's not the case. Insurance companies require that the policy cover the home at replacement cost value, which more often than not does not translate to the sales price. Sometimes it's below and sometimes it's above, and in the current market, I feel like we're more often seeing that the replacement cost value is above the sales price. People are getting homes at a deal right now, and in my opinion, and you can speak more to that, but so I'm having to explain to people that it would actually take $350,000 to rebuild this home versus the $287,000 that you're paying for the home.
Absolutely. And then, when a policy is written at that replacement cost, how is that cost determined? Like, is there like a group of mice at calculators somewhere, like hammering out these numbers? How is that actually determined, especially when a house is probably historic or architecturally unique? How do you land at that replacement cost value?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So more since Hurricane Ida, each company has their own replacement cost software. So we plug in the specs of the home and they determine the coverage that they're going to require it take to rebuild that home. So it can be kind of interesting because I might present you two quotes from, one from each different carrier, and it'll be a different number, which is not ideal for us because that, doesn't land well always with the client, but each company has their own software. They determine what coverage they're going to require. And in that replacement cost estimate, obviously we say the age of the home and the specific characteristics. It can it's going to ask from the type of flooring that's in the home to the roof shape to the roofing material, the age. Where we're seeing the difference in some of these replacement cost estimators is because some of them will let us plug in line by line specific information, while others are a little more generic. And so when that happens, let's say you've got a house that was built in 1900, they're automatically assuming certain characteristics about that home. So that's why you're seeing, a house that may have been updated after Katrina completely, right? So it's got current building materials in it, yet the company with the most competitive rate might say, well, this house has plaster walls, it's got wood molding rather than MDF board and less expensive materials that we would have now to replace it. So that's why you're seeing the difference in some of these replacement cost estimates. But what's nice is some of these companies do have a replacement cost estimate where we can be very specific, about the building materials, and it gives a more accurate, calculation of what it would cost today to replace those materials.
And we'll talk a little bit more later on about what buyers should be looking for in homes that will help get them a more favorable policy and stuff like that. But I think that's so important to know, is that it's not your insurance agent who's setting this. It's set by industry standards. It's a lot of times a program, but we will provide as much information as possible as real estate agents to your insurance agent. And as I talk about all the time, it's all about building your team. Like Lee, or if you have a different insurance agent, they are an integral part of your real estate team. These are all people who are going to be looking out for you. I know that we have been under contract for clients before, and they've had their initial policies, and then you have continued to scrounge for the best option for them. And thank you, Jay. Coverage you can believe in. We'll workshop it. I love it.
We love a pun. We love a pun.
Love a pun. But Lee will come back later on and say, hey, I actually found a better policy for you. And then you can implement that before you're closing. And then, of course, months after you've closed, you can reshop policies later on, get a better price. And let's talk a bit about dwelling coverage, the rising cost of construction materials, because another concern that I hear from buyers is whether their coverage will still be adequate years down the line. As construction costs continue to rise, they're fully burdened, rebuilding costs tend to increase annually. How do you determine whether there's enough coverage today, knowing that those costs will likely go up over time?
Yeah, so most insurance companies have a built-in what they call inflation guard. So, not everybody loves it, but every year you'll notice your dwelling coverage ticks up, and that's to compensate for that. You as a homeowner have a responsibility to notify your agent if you've done changes to the home, that may increase its value. But the insurance company also has its own responsibility, right? And that's why they include that inflation guard. And they've agreed that, they've got you covered at 100% replacement cost, or at least all the carriers I work with, right? So when we put a policy in place, they've got the inflation guard. As it goes up over 5 years, some of the responsibility is on them to make sure that they have covered it at the right amount. So as long as you've notified that any updates that are significant that would change the value of the home, or if none of those things have happened, then the insurance company is they're gonna make you whole, on that policy if you have damage to your home.
Yeah, and there's something too that I've noticed is like when people, maybe this is your first time buying and you've never seen a homeowners policy page before. You may never have seen what the declarations page or the coverages page looks like.
Right.
How can you, is there a sliding scale of coverages? Maybe I don't keep crown jewels and furs and, high-tech equipment in my house. Do I have to carry the same as someone who may carry a bunch of, valuable antiques in their home?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because, So that's contents coverage, or what's called personal property coverage. So that's your belongings inside the home, from pots and pans to your furniture to clothing. And what many people don't realize is if you have higher value items, you actually need to discuss that with your agent, because you may need to endorse the policy or get a separate policy to make sure those items are covered properly. When you think of furs or high value art work, antique furniture, even, that is likely going to be something, if you want it covered fully at replacement cost coverage, that you're going to have to endorse the policy specifically for coverage for that, or get a separate, what we call a personal articles policy to cover those items. Otherwise, you want to have photos of everything to show the quality if you can. Ideally, it's not to say that it's a requirement, but ideally you have some video footage or photos of just kind of the general quality of everything in your home, so that should you have to make a claim, they can see, you did have, these nicer items. But there's kind of like an average essentially on what they're going to calculate for furniture and stuff, unless you come with receipts. But most people don't have receipts for everything they purchased, right? So if they can't see the quality of the item, they have calculations that they do to kind of determine what it would take to replace, the individual items in your home.
Yeah, and quick note on that, you brought up something really important, that even if you have a renter's policy, whether you're a homeowner or a renter, I strongly recommend, I think Lee would agree with me, is one practice I have, if I ever leave, before Ida, I took a video of my entire house. I opened all of the cabinets. I opened my closets. I looked under the bed. Like, I kept a video record of everything in my house, because if there is some type of catastrophic loss, you may not recall what all was in your property, especially in situations of flood and fire. You may not be able to discern what was in your home before, and you may not remember, but you want to make sure you get your coverages for that, and you get your payment for that. One question I have based on what you just said is, can you explain a little bit about what it means to endorse a policy? How do we mean endorse?
Yeah, so it's not a standard coverage. In other words, it's something that we are adding to the policy that doesn't just come automatically, right? So most people, the situation is jewelry, or artwork. Actually, is pretty common as well. But you've got a wedding band, or a Rolex watch, or maybe not even something necessarily that expensive, but there are certain limits on jewelry, furs, stuff like that, even firearms, that are written in the policy language, and it's usually around $2,500 to $5,000. They're not going to pay out more than that unless you've endorsed the policy for these specific items. Sometimes you can do what's called a blanket coverage and say, hey, I've got lots of jewelry and it's $50,000 in total, but I don't want to itemize everything. There are certain companies that will allow you to do a blanket policy in that situation. It's certainly a conversation you want to have specifically with your agent to determine how to best cover it. I personally usually recommend people cover these on a separate policy, because my mindset, whether it's a couple things, with our market as it is, people end up shopping their homeowners insurance often every year, if not more sometimes, but every year is kind of the standard. And when you're bouncing from policy to policy, chasing that better premium, if you've endorsed a policy for jewelry, often you have to go back and show appraisals or receipts or something, and it creates a lot more legwork. If you get a separate personal articles policy, that policy is like set it and forget it. Other than, actually, I have a personal articles policy I just had to update the other day, because the value of gold has gone up, and I want mine and my wife's wedding bands covered properly. So I got a recent appraisal. But in general, you put those policies in place, you don't have to keep going back and updating them. It's covered, and you just don't have to worry about it again. Kind of creates a lot more legwork when you endorse it on your homeowner's policy, in my opinion.
That kind of reminds me, I watch a lot of Antiques Roadshow, and they always talk about insurance value on there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's some like really expensive jug in my house, I don't know, like there's always something. So, Lee, is that something that you provide if somebody has an individual item of great value? Is that something that you cover as well?
We can. It depends on the item, but I mean, we can endorse a lot more than you might realize. People have silverware collections,
Mhm.
antique silverware collections. I think that's probably less and less common as time goes on, but stuff like that, we can get a personal articles policy for that.
So it puts a little bit more of the control back in their hands. So instead of there being such a preset box, I think that's something that maybe a misconception about insurance that people have is that you will go to buy a house and they say, this is your insurance cost, and that is it.
Right.
But there is more of a conversation, and that's why you should work with someone locally, such as yourself,
Absolutely.
to customize those policies for your individual needs.
Well, absolutely. And the question I get asked frequently, I work with a lot of first time buyers, and we'll be going over the policy line by line. And when we get to personal property, they're like, was that enough? And that's the one thing that I cannot answer for you, right? Because it's literally your belongings that you're bringing into this home. But I do try to really get people to recognize how much stuff you actually have in a home, because it's so frequent that I'll have a client, let's say there's $50,000 on a quote for personal property. And they're like, oh, that's way too much. I don't have near that much stuff. When you really start to think about all of your clothing, your pots, your pans, your, whatever, your refrigerator in there. I mean, it starts to add up quickly. Now, 50,000 can be plenty for a lot of people. And then there's a lot of people it would not be enough for. And also some people really are opting to go for less coverage on personal property because, you're always hedging your bets with insurance, right? You're either betting that you're going to have to make a claim and you're going to need all the coverage, or you're betting that you may not. So more and more people with the premiums as high as they've been are, cutting back on personal property because that can sometimes lower the premium significantly. But, it is a conversation you want to have with your agent just to make sure that you're aware of what it really means, what each coverage means, and that you're comfortable with where you are on the coverage amount.
And do you have any advice or recommendations or tools for people who want to perhaps like take stock in their personal belongings? Where would you do you need to go through and pull out every shirt and give it a value? How can you go about that?
It's funny. This has been years ago, but there was a list, and I should have kept the PDF honestly. But there was this list where you could kind of just like tick these boxes of, accounting for an inventory in your home. To be honest, I don't think the general public is going to do that. I know there's a lot of people out there that would probably find that thrilling or fascinating to do, but I would say there's more people that would not. But yeah, I'm sure that you could Google and find a way to take a stock or inventory of everything you have in your home. I don't plan to do that anytime soon. I, you know, I don't know. Not sure the juice is worth the squeeze on that.
That's a peak type A personality move right there for
Yeah,
anybody.
I didn't want to stereotype anybody, but I can tell you this: it's not me.
Yes, the person who would do that knows that they are the person who would do that for
Yeah,
sure.
that's right. They know. You know who you are.
Oh, yes, and it's not me or you. So I want to touch on umbrella policies because it's something that buyers hear a lot about, but they may not always understand exactly what that means. Well, first let's talk about additional living expenses. Like if a home becomes uninhabitable, I think this was a big topic of concern for people post Hurricane Ida. If a home becomes uninhabitable during repairs or replacement, and there's an umbrella policy, is an umbrella policy relevant there, or is that coverage handled elsewhere in a standard policy? How do you handle those like displacement costs, I would say?
Yeah, so this is a hot button item anytime a significant storm happens, right? Because people are stressed, they're concerned about their homes, and now they feel like, where am I going to go? How am I going to pay for this? And obviously, everybody knows if you go onto social media, there's a lot of squeaky wheels and you hear negative stuff, and usually that's only who you hear from. So additional living expense or loss of use is what you'll see listed on the policy. And this is for if you file a claim, your home is damaged and it is deemed uninhabitable. Now, here's the rub. Everybody in South Louisiana thinks when their power goes out, that is uninhabitable. And I could not agree more. Unfortunately, the insurance companies disagree completely. That is a creature comfort in their minds, and the home is still, able to be lived in, and it just doesn't warrant, a claim. Now, sometimes you'll have companies that will pay out on this. It's unusual though. You need to think more of like, my windows are bricking out, or, some of the roof is exposed, right? Something like that. But just know this, don't start racking up bills without talking to your claims adjuster, and clarifying like, hey, me and my family need to go. It's not to say they'll reject you, but, just don't set yourself up for a surprise with, racking up bills. But yeah, I mean, if the house is opened up and while they're repairing the home, they want you to live somewhere that makes sense. They're not expecting you to live in those conditions. So that's what it's for. Now, umbrella coverage is not relevant at all to this. What umbrella coverage is umbrella coverage is excess coverage. So it's liability coverage. But when the reason I want to specify that it's excess coverage is it means you have to have an underlying limit of coverage first. And umbrella is what comes in when that caps out. Okay, so when this coverage is exhausted, umbrella comes in and takes care of the rest. So on your homeowner's insurance policy, you should see a minimum of $300,000 in coverage, by the way. I get very upset when I see a policy with $100,000 in coverage on it, because A, that'll do nothing. That may cover the attorney's fees if you're sued, but B, if you have your agent quote the difference in $100,000 in coverage and $300,000 in coverage, it's $20 or less a year, 99% of the time, unless you just have some, I don't know, very expensive policy, but that is usually the case. As a matter of fact, I had a client today who we went to battle. She was dead set on, I put 300. First of all, her policy that we were replacing had $100,000 from a different agent on it, and I put $500,000 in coverage on it. And she was like, hey, let's lower that to $300,000. I said, you're going to say, and she had a really expensive policy, actually. She's out by the lake. I said, you might save $50 a year. And she pressed and she said, no, well, tell me how much it's going to be. So I reached out, found out the exact number was $53 a year. We talked for about 30 minutes about this, and we are in truly one of the most litigious areas in the country. I mean, I think we're third in the nation, but don't quote me on that. And I tried to explain to her, I said, if somebody sues you and you're found liable, $300,000 goes quite quickly. And her house appraises at $600,000. I said, that leaves your home exposed. And that's what people don't realize. Their assets are exposed. And so even if you don't have $600,000 in equity, they're going to take whatever equity out of that. Morris Bart goes and wins against your attorney, or, Dudley DeBosier, my favorite. Sorry, inside joke. But, if they win, when your insurance is exhausted, they'll go after you personally. And if you have assets, those assets are at risk. But to get back to the umbrella coverage, so let's say in this case, she's got $500,000 in liability coverage on her homeowners. By the way, she did go with $500,000 after our conversation.
It worked.
I can't take all the credit, because she said, okay, basically when I wouldn't back down, she said, well, let me ask my husband. And he said, man, you're really doing the most for $53. And so he helped win this argument for us. But so, if somebody sues, and these people actually, they butt up to a canal. So their backyard goes right into a waterway. And I'm like, you of all people should consider that something could happen there. If somebody's injured, you're found liable somehow, they sue you and a judge orders you owe them $1 million. That 500,000 is exhausted. Well, hopefully you have an umbrella policy that kicks in once that 500,000 exhausts, and you've got another 500,000 or more. Usually most umbrella policies are $1 million or up, and that takes care of it. Because if not, that house or whatever you own is at risk. Future paychecks can be at risk.
Cars, boats, wage garnishment.
Anything. Yeah, truly. And so many people don't realize that. And, it's sad how many people I see here in Louisiana actually really exposed by not having enough liability coverage. Umbrella can get a little convoluted too, because we have very high auto insurance premiums. And in order to have an umbrella policy to cover your autos, you have to have high limits in the first place. So that's why you also see a lot of people not get it. But you can get an umbrella policy just to cover your home.
And you mentioned a good example of it, and that leads into my next question, and also a question that we have in the chat. Is you were talking about that this individual client has a canal towards the back of their house, and then you were mentioning cars. Like, what are some examples, or even like a contractor on your property? What are some examples of what you could be sued for, in which they may pursue your homeowner's policy specifically, or which your homeowner's policy may cover in general? What are some examples of situations where liability comes into play and could cause people to go after your homeowners?
It can be something as simple as a loose railing or not having a railing on your porch, which is why you really see these insurance companies, for the most part, drive home having railings on porches. It could be a loose board. Let's say you've got a post that, on your front porch that holds it up. Somebody leans on it, something as simple as that. Something falls on them. Sadly, people go for the jugular in these scenarios. Not everybody's your friend. Dogs. I actually know a girl I used to work with whose cousin sued her other cousin because her dog nipped her kid, which I think we can all agree does sound like a bad thing, but was like trying to take them to the cleaners over it. And the child was barely, like, it was, a superficial injury. So that alone tells you, right? You never know who, and it can be a postal worker. It can be somebody who just walks up to your door. It can be a Jehovah's Witness for all we know. Somebody who comes onto your property and gets injured can sue you, and you can be found liable. And again, you have to consider it's not just like what a judge deems you owe for that injury. You've got attorney fees that are going to be paid through the liability insurance.
And then what kind of precautions? I mean, you mentioned, things that we also harp on a lot of regular home maintenance, including, making sure if there's, that post on the front of the house that might be loose. What types of things would you recommend? One, the long and short of it is you're never going to be fully protected. Like you can't saran wrap your whole house and Scotch guard everything.
That's
and
right.
Like you'll always have some degree of exposure to liability and risk in that case.
Right.
But what are some things that you might recommend to a homeowner, or even, I know that can happen to renters or anybody on the street? Like what type of things might you recommend to someone to reduce their risk?
Well, and I want to get back to actually something you mentioned too, contractors coming onto your property. I just heard a story the other day. A contractor went to a client's house, was doing repairs, realized they didn't have their ladder. So they used the homeowner's ladder. That ladder broke and the contractor sued the homeowner. And from what I'm told, they won. I don't know all the details, but even something like that, which by the way, I'll never lend a contractor anything again, just after hearing that, because that's crazy. But make sure if you do have a contractor working at your house that they're insured. Ask them for proof of coverage. Their certificate of insurance is what it's called. You want to, be sure that they're covered so they're not coming after you. And then, of course, don't loan them any tools. Things to protect yourself, of course, are maintaining the home, which insurance companies require that anyway, but they're not going to come and check on your house all the time, right? They're going to check on it once when you put the policy in place. They may come and review it, when the policy renews, but it's up to you to maintain that house and make sure there's not somewhere where somebody can slip and fall or get injured. The water exposure, this is why companies are so particular about fences around pools and stuff. They don't want a child, going into your backyard, falling in a pool and drowning. I mean, it's kind of worst case scenario, but I actually know someone that's happened to, and so it does happen.
Yeah. And then I think too, with everything that you were saying, there is, we are Southern and we share and we're giving and we welcome everyone into our home. And it's like, if I have it, you have it. What's mine is yours. Like, we're very those kind of people.
Yeah.
In these instances, it is okay to be selfish. Like, you may feel like you're being selfish or rude in some way, but that's the type of thing that you need to do to reduce your liability of, oh, the contractor's over and I would get them out of the house sooner if I lent them this ladder and they'd be done and they move on. But you don't know that. So be a little bit selfish and say, hey, we can reschedule this for another time when you've got your ladder.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And funny, there was a situation that came up. Another realtor reached out to me the other day and they were trying to advise their client. And so they were buying a home and they had made the agreement with the sellers to let the sellers stay in the home for some period of time. Right. And they weren't going to actually pay rent, but essentially they're tenants at this point. And she's like, what do they need to be aware of? And, I was really just addressing the policy type. I was like, well, we need to make sure it's this type of policy for this situation. Well, as we got into it more, she mentioned there was a pool on the property. And that's when I said, okay, now we're talking about something different. I said, these people need to be vetted just like a regular tenant. And because you want to treat them as a tenant and make sure, let's say, and I hate to think the worst, but let's say you've got a predator living at your house, right? And they have a pool party and whatever, something happens with the kid. I don't know. I'm just trying to make it sound, worst case scenario here, but they're like, oh, the pool party for the neighborhood, and they invite people over and then they do something awful to a child or harm a child in some sort of way. Now, you as a homeowner didn't do your due diligence if you did not do a background check on these people. That's how crazy it can get. When attorneys are gonna find that route to your liability insurance, right? Somebody's gonna be at fault. And if this tenant doesn't have enough, or let's say they have some, but we want more, we're gonna go after that homeowner.
Yeah. There's no end to what they will find. If you think you're hiding something, they will find it. So it's good to have those coverages and that kind of protection. Well, let's pivot a little bit. I know we've talked a lot about liability because that's a big question that we get a lot. And another thing that I see pretty frequently is people get confused about why FHA and VA appraisals are far more stringent than a traditional conventional appraisal. Just as a sidebar, this is exactly why they are that way. The requirements for handrails, chipping paint, all that kind of stuff, it is to reduce a federally backed mortgage's liability in this situation. Before we move on to the next topic, I do have a question here that steps us back just a little bit. But what do you do when an item cannot be replaced? Like, what if it's something, this is tough. It's an emotional situation. What do you do, or how is it handled if there is an item that is lost that cannot be replaced?
Sure. Yeah, this is a tough one, right? Because a lot of insurance companies are going to say, hey, we have this covered for $40,000. We're going to give you $40,000. There are companies who will do, these tend to be the more expensive companies, but there are companies who will say, we're going to do everything we can and we're going to get that replacement item, if they can. I actually just heard a story the other day about, it was a piece of art, and the client, it got damaged, and the client's, I don't want, however much money it was. I don't want that. I want that piece of art. and this particular insurance company paid to have it restored. Now, that's a special.
That's a good one.
It is. Yeah. It's a special situation. Think your higher value situations, right? Your average $300,000 homeowner is not going to have that situation happen, probably because they're not going to be with one of the insurance companies that's going to do it in general.
Which is like, what is it called? Like Lloyd's of London or something? What is it? Lloyd's of London?
Chubb. I mean, Lloyd's could be the underwriter for it, but Chubb or Pure, if you've heard of those, again, you got to think $1 million plus homes. That's where you're going to see that type of. But in general, it is going to be a stated value, right? An agreed value that you came up with, whether you provided an appraisal or however the insurance company determined this is what we're going to cover it for. You're most likely just going to be paid out that amount.
Yeah, just as close as they can get to replacing it without actually doing it. Well, to head back in the direction we were going, I want to talk in this next section. I want to talk a little bit about reassurances, because I think there's a lot of fear just in general right now, but also a lot of fear about homeowners insurance. Where do you see home buyers and homeowners feeling the most surprised or caught off guard when it comes to insurance, besides the price?
Yeah, the dwelling coverage is the thing that's most confusing to people, understandably. The price, honestly, I think just kind of understanding deductibles, it's interesting. I think people just get overwhelmed naturally when it comes to homeowner, anything really with the home buying process, but homeowners insurance included. When people recognize that if you try to correlate homeowners insurance as much as you can to auto insurance, it starts to click a little more, because people will call me and they'll say, hey, I've got rodents in my attic, I need to make a claim, or, termite damage to my home, I need to make a claim. And it's like, that's not what insurance is for. Just like your vehicle. I mean, there are sometimes companies that will offer this as an additional coverage that you can endorse your policy for. But in general, maintenance of a home, it's on the homeowner, right? One of the worst situations I saw was actually clients had just bought a house and their floors just started to buckle. And they're like, what is going on? So there was no sudden and catastrophic event, which is what insurance is for. What happened, it was a poor construction. There was no ventilation under their home, their crawl space, and whatever moisture gathered up under there, it just over time built up. And really lucky timing for the sellers, because when I tell you it was right after they bought it, it was within a few months, but in their floors buckled, it was like $20,000 they had to pay for. So, home maintenance, I think, is really one of the most important things to drive home. And also just that your deductible has to be met and exceeded before your insurance kicks in. So when something happens at your house, go get an estimate. Find out what it's going to cost before you even attempt to make a claim. I mean, you can always, I always tell my clients, call me as soon as you think you need to make one. And then I'm going to advise in most situations, hey, unless it's obvious that it's going to exceed the deductible, but hey, go get a estimate. Let's see how much it's going to cost and see whether or not making a claim makes sense. There's also certain types of claims that may exceed your deductible, but may still not make sense. Just like when you go and have a car accident and, you're like, oh, great. Like, this guy's going to have $200 worth of damage. I don't want that claim on my history. If you start to think about it a little more like that, and it's not to say, hey, don't use your insurance, but you do want to be strategic about it in a market like ours so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot, especially with water damage claims, like from a pipe bursting or AC leaking in your home. There are different types of claims that are considered less desirable because an insurance company sees it as you disregard it as something. Again, it's not to say you shouldn't use it, but you want to be calculated about when you use the insurance.
I think most people would probably say don't make petty claims. Like if it's, I
Yeah,
think
I
that's
know.
it's not petty. Like you're going through and you're experiencing an issue in your home, but they may see it in the traditional sense of the word petty. Like it is a smaller claim, and if it's
Frivolous,
only barely
right?
if it may only barely exceed your deductible, it may not be worth it at all because your premium could go up over time, and you're going to be paying for it anyway.
Well, since I'm just on a kick of doing extreme cases, I had a sweet couple come to me. This has been about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And they wanted to buy a house, and they had never owned before. They'd only rented, but they'd always had renter's insurance. Now, this is huge. Most people do not know this. So they'd only had renter's insurance. They had made 5 claims on different properties they'd been in like, I think it was in 5 years, and I couldn't insure them. Now I could actually, I shouldn't say I couldn't. Louisiana citizens would have insured these people, and they couldn't afford the house because of the premiums. And when I tell you there were 2 claims that were like $500, petty claims. People don't realize renter's insurance is your first homeowner's insurance policy. That history follows you just like a driving record follows you. So, teach that to your kids, because I mean, you've got 18-year-olds going out getting an apartment, and they're like, oh, my laptop got broke. Let me go file a claim. Actually, that was another claim there. They did a claim because their kid had jammed like a crayon or something in a laptop, which I can't even believe was covered, to be honest. But, so just be smart. Think about it and talk with your agent. I'm here as an advocate. I'm not here to defend the insurance company or to protect, them versus you. I'm here to explain it to you so you know how to proceed, or you at least have the information where you can decide how to proceed.
Absolutely. And I just wrote that down. Renter's insurance is your first homeowner's insurance. I love that because I learned something. I love having our experts on because I learned something, and I carry
Yeah.
renter's insurance for now. And so it's like, okay, I'm glad I didn't make that IDA claim back in the day for whatever.
Yeah.
Would have been nice to have the cash then, but as I'm looking for a house, right now to buy, I'm like, okay, thank God. So,
well, and I will tell you I'm sorry, excuse me for a second.
No.
Turn my heater off. I will tell you, fortunately, what they consider acts of God do not impact your insurability for the most part. Now, when you get into higher claims amount, it is going to trigger a response, and they're going to say, hey, what happened here? What repairs were made? Is it all repaired? Was there mold damage? There's certain things that will be, triggering for them to think, okay, do we want to proceed? But in general, you're going to be okay if it had to do with a weather-related event, or act of God, a tree falling on your house, something like that, unless it's a tree that rotted. But those in general do not impact you. Well, I mean, it happens.
You heard it here first. Check your trees, everybody. Check your trees.
Speaking of trees, truly, check your trees, check your neighbor's trees, because if a tree is rotting, in theory, it's not going to be covered by insurance. And I just say that because sometimes I think they give a little grace on that, but you're usually not going to be covered because that's maintenance. That oak tree out there, rotting away, it's either your responsibility or your neighbors. And when a house is damaged by a tree, usually the home that it hits is whose insurance handles it. So even if it's in your neighbor's yard, usually your insurance handles it. It can be subrogated, which means they may go after your neighbor's insurance, but in general, it's going to follow the house that it fell on. And if you've been telling your neighbor, hey, cut this tree back, get some sort of notate some sort of evidence of I've asked this guy to do this, because you want your insurance to subrogate, because you don't want that claim on your history.
Yes. As always, get it in writing. Everything.
Get it in writing. Get it on video. Put it on TikTok.
That's right. That's right. Cameras are getting smart. Wear your meta glasses and go talk to your neighbor. I don't know. That's kind of an invasion of privacy.
That's creepy, but
it's evident. We'll leave the moral, ethical quandaries up to you as an individual.
Yeah.
So we've got about 11 minutes left. So I want to speed run these last couple of questions. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead. What would you say in your experience separates buyers who feel prepared and confident from those who feel like overwhelmed once that insurance conversation starts?
Truthfully, I mean, people like yourself are going to tee it up, right? You're going to say, "Hey, talk to this agent. Go over this so you do feel comfortable." It's amazing how quick of a conversation it usually is to go from somebody being like, "I have no understanding of this," to feeling comfortable and like, "Okay, now I get it," because it's not complicated. It's just you don't know until and it really isn't complicated, but you do need a professional to explain it to you if you're unfamiliar.
Yeah, that another opportunity for me to plug that homebuyer boot camp is this is something that I talk about in that class is that it is never too early to start building your team and having those conversations. Whether you're 6 months out, you might be a year out, this is a dream of yours to become a homeowner. Go ahead and be talking to people and attending things like this live stream to be getting familiar with it because it is a sort of its own language, right? Like with everything that goes into home ownership and home buying and the process and the finances, it's a bit of its own language. So it's never too early to start familiarizing yourself with the language, the key players, finding one of those team members, such as Lee, myself, a trusted lender, to go ahead and be having these conversations. So as you hear things, you can ask those questions because you really may not know. You don't know what you don't know until you get into it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, all the successful agents that I work with, they have a team they work with, and because they know that this person knows what this person requires, and and you're gonna stay on track, get to the finish line, and know that they're covered properly, and everything's handled
Mhm.
right, and it's going to create less stress because we all know buying a home is very stressful. Like it's very exciting when you're looking at the houses and then you get into the nitty gritty and you're like, oh my God, it's how many more DocuSigns and how many more documents do I need to send in? But, just have trusted advisors, like you said.
Yes. And I hope, spoiler alert to everyone, I helped Lee and his wife buy their house. So maybe that's
Sure.
why their process was stressful. So-
No. It's just a lot.
It's
No,
naturally
no.
stressful.
Actually, honestly, our transaction was super easy in my opinion. But, I walk through this experience with clients daily. And I remember the first time I bought a home and it was tragic. I mean, it was rough. So, you want to be with a good team. And, it's a lot of follow up. It's a lot, I think clients feel like they're being thrown a lot at one time. And it's just like, you can almost get blind because it's so
Mhm.
much. You can't even look at anything and take it in at all.
Yeah, I tell people to be wary of decision fatigue. That's one of the things I try to coach my clients on is to communicate with us if you start feeling overwhelmed by the process, because wherever we can slow it down or we can try to simplify things a bit because you will be making executive decision after executive decision regarding a lot of things in a very brief window of time. So decision fatigue is something to be looking out for. And the next question is how early, what can they do early on in the process? And how early should someone start getting realistic about, starting to obtain insurance guidance, and that even though they may not have a property they have in mind or that they're under contract on?
Yeah, you certainly don't need to be under contract. And in fact, I'd encourage you to speak with an agent well before that, right? Because the worst thing you can do is fall in love with a house only for insurance to destroy that dream. I joke that, I'm like the Grim Reaper. I'm essentially like a dentist. Like nobody wants to see me, but you need me, right? Um, but no, I mean, once you know that you're actually interested in purchasing a home, you need to start speaking with an agent, to
Mhm.
see like because Richard and I talk about it all the time, but people notoriously go on Zillow, they find a house they like, they use the calculator, and Zillow puts in there that insurance is $80 a month or $100 a month, and
For the
you're like, oh
plains
my
of
god,
Kansas, maybe.
that's right. Yeah. And you're like, this is fantastic. I can afford this house or maybe even buy a bigger house.
Mhm.
And then they get an insurance quote and then they are sad because they are not getting that house. Obviously that's not always the case, but it does happen frequently because people just don't realize what a major factor and how insurance can vary. You cannot tell I can give you an idea, but even in this market, it's hard to just look at a home and say, okay, that's going to be this much. Now, back in 2021, I could have done it easily, but the market has changed and prices vary significantly. Rates are determined by the client as well as the house. And, so you're not going to know until you actually get the home quoted if you can afford it.
Yes, it is client specific and it is home specific. You can have two homes next to each other that based on the roof age or whether the electrical has been updated, you can have, there are some pockets in New Orleans or in the greater New Orleans area that are a little notorious for high. I'm thinking some areas of Kenner right by the lake that just have brutal insurance premiums. So it is important we can't make blanket statements of if you live in Lakeview, you're screwed. But if you live in Uptown, you're good to go. Like we can't make those. So that's why it's important. And that's why in terms of the home buying process, I recommend to all of my clients, and I kind of, require it, is that we will get your insurance quote and connect that to your lender so they can plug in the numbers before we write the offer, because we need to have our best footing possible when we're writing and negotiating offers. And you need to know that you can get into it because you don't want to waste the money on inspections and spend all that money only to be heartbroken later on. That is a really tough position that we try to avoid you being in.
I know. And we're going to talk about characteristics too, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, just real quick, we know the wiring, outdated wiring, it's going to be a no-go, not a no-go. We can insure anything, but you may not be able to get a policy that meets your lender's requirements if you have certain outdated characteristics on a home. So you definitely want to know that going in before you, again, fall in love with a house that you may not be able to get.
Yeah. So let's touch on that real quick. And that's actually the last question I have on the list here. No, that's perfect. That's natural progression of conversation. So tell us, what kind of characteristics should people be looking out for? By the way, if you ever hear knob and tube, just run. Like that is the original type of electricity. The very first residential electricity had an inspection the other day and they discovered knob and tube. It can be remediated. But Lee, tell us, what are some characteristics that a home buyer should be looking out for that could most likely lead them to having the most favorable homeowners premium?
Yeah. So, of course, so many homes are 100 years old around here, or older in some cases. So you do want to make sure plumbing and electrical has been updated. Obviously, everybody pretty much knows that the roof needs to be updated. We've gotten more flexible on roof age, but you need to make sure there's no knob and tube wiring. There's no aluminum wiring. There's no cloth wiring. These are all major fire hazards, and that's why they're a big no-go with insurance companies. Polybutylene plumbing is a big no-go with insurance companies. So you definitely want to be on the lookout for that, or, have it in the contract, hopefully, that the seller is going to give you money to replace it, and we put a builder's risk policy in place while you get that replaced. But that would even be something that you would have to make sure your loan terms work with the insurance requirements, because your down payment, or, I'm not going to pretend to know more about mortgages than I do, but, it changes the guidelines of your loan if you're having to do renovations on the front end. So ideally you get a house that's already updated and you don't have to worry about those things. It'll make your life a lot easier. And, don't forget, fortified roofs are making a huge difference on insurance rates now. Or even if the roof was replaced in 2022, so it wasn't fortified because that hadn't taken off as much, you could get a wind mitigation survey that shows certain characteristics of the roof's construction, as well as a few other things, but that can get you additional credits on your homeowner's insurance.
Absolutely. That's been such an amazing thing. Make sure you follow along with Lee. And then if you're not receiving my mostly weekly newsletter, every time that the Fortified Roofing Grant lottery comes out from the state, I always make sure to include that on my social media and in the newsletter. So make sure you stay tuned with this because that is a wonderful opportunity and it has helped immensely. We were just talking about this the other day. The insurance market, I don't want to tell people, has gotten markedly better, but I'm calling it softening. Like it's easing a bit. We're seeing some relief. The more the shared community risk goes down with people having fortified roofs, the better everyone's policies are going to be.
That's right.
And then just a reminder, if anybody has, as we are getting close to time to wrap up, if you have any remaining questions, make sure you drop those in the chat. If it's something that you don't want to share in chat, our contact information is moving along on the bottom. So you can reach out to either Lee or myself at any of those phone numbers or email addresses below. But my last question is, Lee, everybody knows insurance agent, insurance company. What's the relationship between the two? Like Goosehead Insurance is not an insurance company. Like you don't pay out yourself if there's a damage. Can you tell us what that relationship is between you as an insurance broker / agent and the insurance company themselves?
Yeah, so I'm a broker. I mean, so I do the legwork and the insurance companies pay us just as if I was one of their employees. They pay me that way. So there's no extra cost passed along to the client. But we are in an interesting position rather than like a State Farm. They have, their 5 products or whatever it is. I mean, 1 or 2 of those are for homeowners insurance, but, they have their small little amount of products. We shop, every other carrier that's in this state. Anything that's not considered a captive. So our relationship actually is to be an advocate to the client rather than to the company. Not that we're not advocates for the company as well, but there's no loyalty to any one company. I'm never going to persuade someone to go with company A over B. We're going to find the best rate for the client for that particular house. We only deal with highly rated companies. So that part is a non-issue. So now it's just a matter of, okay, which one of these companies wants you the most? And that's, that's my relationship, is just to do that legwork and then to help guide you once you are a client on how to navigate the claims process if and when you need it.
Absolutely. And that is an invaluable person to have in your court at many turns, not just when there's a hurricane or a fire or something catastrophic. Is a great resource to have all the time. Is there anything else, Lee, that maybe we didn't touch on, or is there anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Oh gosh, the pressure's on. I think you nailed it. I'm sure as soon as we hang up, I'll think of it.
Well, if you do think of it, let me know. I would, we're going to continue to be doing more content for folks, sharing some information. And so, Lee, once again, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and wrap up here. But Lee's information is at the bottom. Yes.
I will say this, sorry, just to go back to the wind mitigation survey really quickly, because Richard obviously helps people buy homes. I highly recommend so even if it's not necessarily going to help you in the immediate, you can get a wind mitigation survey often at a discount when you get it with your home inspection. And so take advantage of that opportunity, because again, we shop insurance all the time. Company B could suddenly come up and they give, extraordinary discounts for those wind mitigation credits. So I do encourage you to go ahead and get those on Richard knows the rules, but on newer roofs especially.
Absolutely. And Jeff McClenny of New Orleans Home Inspections, he's kind of my go-to guy in it. Not every home inspector is qualified to perform a wind mitigation survey. So make sure that you are working with someone who can offer that, or you're getting that done simultaneously along with your other inspections so that your policy is correct. But someone like Jeff at New Orleans Home Inspections is a great resource for that. So once again, thank you so much, Lee. We really appreciate you sharing your time, your expertise with us. I know that this is super helpful for so many people. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
It. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Lee.
All right. Bye.
Bye. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining us tonight for the first live stream of 2026. Thank you so much to Lee. As always, Lee is an incredible resource, an incredible person to have access to and to have in your home buying journey. So thank you again to Lee. As a reminder, if you're thinking about buying and want to talk through your timeline, your goals, how insurance fits into your individual situation, I'm offering those 1-hour private homebuyer boot camps totally for free, either in person or via Google Meet. You can inquire on my website or contact me directly. They've been great. The feedback has been wonderful. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the folks who are attending those. And remember that all of the education and resources I put out or share or mention will always be free. One of my core beliefs, I say it at the end of every single live stream, and I'm going to say it again here today, but one of my core beliefs is empowerment through education. So throughout your process, whether you're working with me or another real estate advisor or real estate agent, I want to make sure that you feel educated and informed throughout your process. So all of this will always be free. So remember to book your private home buyer boot camp. Those take about 1 hour, either in person at our beautiful new Engel & Volkers New Orleans shop on Magazine Street or via Google Meet. They both work perfectly for that. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got a lot more fun stuff coming out in 2026. I'm so excited for that. Please go check out the videos that we already have out there, the past live streams. The last live stream we had was with Leslie O'Neill of Movement Mortgage, all about what you need to do in terms of financing to get ready to buy. Soon we're going to have some guests from title companies, inspectors. We've got a lot coming out. And lastly, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Richard Hebert Realtor and follow on TikTok at Real Estate New Orleans. And if you ever want to peruse homes or check out the resources available on my website, that is richardhebertrealtor.com. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a fabulous evening, and happy Mardi Gras.